The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is suing crypto trust company Paxos over Binance Stablecoin, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. And checking in with that story is CoinDesk Gold Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who was also the editor of CoinDesk's The State of Crypto newsletter. Nick, so last week we saw the SEC going after staking as a service, and now it seems that they are going after Paxos. What is the story here?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, it's been a busy 12 hours, I would say. So yesterday, the Wall Street Journal reported that the SEC has sent a Wells notice to Paxos, basically kind of a declaration of intent that they're going to sue. I don't think they've actually sued yet. And we don't have a lot of detail. We just know that this is somehow tied to the Binance USD stablecoin, as you mentioned. What also happened last night is Paxos announced it would stop offering or minting and issuing the same stablecoin at the request of the New York Department of Financial Services. And, we reported last week that NYDFS was investigating Paxos. And, again, we don't have a lot of detail here, but it does seem to be A, tied to the Binance stablecoin, and B, NYDFS put out a notice early this morning, making it a little bit more explicit and saying they were talking about Binance Peg USD, which is a version of the stablecoin that is backed by the actual stablecoin on non-Ethereum chains.
Maybe you can explain to folks the relationship between Paxos and BUSD, and in terms of jurisdiction. I understand Paxos, they're based in the United States, right? Whereas Binance, a little more dubious on their jurisdiction.
Right, yeah. So Paxos is the issuer. They manage it. They handle the actual tech side. Binance handles the reserves, as I understand it. So they, communicate with Paxos about that aspect. But it's really just a Binance-branded stablecoin. But Paxos provides the technology and all of the licensing and regulatory issuance. As you mentioned, they're based in New York, so they actually have a New York trust charter as well as a provisional bank charter through a federal banking regulator, the Office of the Control of the Currency. So it is kind of a white label solution type product.
So let's get into a little bit of this, because you mentioned the real issue isn't even, obviously it's not Paxos USD, or what do they call it? The Paxos standard, it used to be called, nor is it even BUSD itself, but it's a very specific type of BUSD that the SEC seems to have trouble with. And you said it was pegged to BUSD. So can you kind of explain a little bit, go into a little bit of detail for the folks at home as to what those differences are? Because that seems to have been a point of contention a few months ago, if I recall, where people were saying that it seemed to have been, in many ways, some free money that Binance seems to have thought itself to have.
Yeah, so I guess it is worth making sure that we don't currently know if it is Binance Peg USD. I think it's PBUSD. It seems likely based on the fact that DFS has taken action on that particular token. But what it is so you have Binance USD, which is backed by whatever treasuries and dollars and whatever normal, like real world tangible assets that your average regulator could take a look at and say, oh yeah, this makes sense. That's totally normal basket of things to back a stablecoin with. Binance Peg USD, Binance USD is issued on Ethereum. Also worth noting. Now, Binance Peg USD is issued on non-Ethereum chains, and it's backed by BUSD itself. So, I think this might be one area where regulators are a little bit more concerned. You have a stablecoin that's functionally backed by another stablecoin, and it's labeled the same thing, but you can kind of understand where regulators might be a bit concerned about. And as you mentioned, last month, Bloomberg reported that there were issues with how Binance was maintaining its PBUSD reserves. Binance later came out and said, they admitted it, they said they had some issues with, they claimed it was a timing issue, that they had the assets backing the Binance Peg USD, but because of how they were rebalancing their wallets, if you were looking at publicly available data, you might see that the the Peg USD was less backed at sometimes than the actual stablecoin was.
Right.
And they claimed they fixed it, that people were not affected, redemptions were unaffected. And, we haven't heard much about that since, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was, in fact, what regulators are taking a look at and saying, this is like some really weird stuff. What are y'all doing here?
Right. So just to kind of summarize, it's that BUSD is backed by US dollars and it's run by Paxos. That we know. But then the idea is that Binance then took the BUSD and used that as reserves for BPUSD, which they controlled. Paxos potentially didn't have much to do with it, as far as we know. And they just said, "Oh, yeah, this is Binance. This is BUSD, but on different chains, backed by BUSD." Okay, great. But is it one for one? That's the question that seems to be floating here.